welcome back to a brand new episode of Full Metal RPG. I'm your host, Brendan Carrion. This is episode 118, and we're doing a deep dive into the book, Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. Not, the theoretical idea of a cauldron that you could also jump into, like Gurgi at the end of the Black Cauldron. Anyway, I'm joined by a little bit of a modified deep dive crew. Eric, my homie Eric from high school, wasn't able to make it. He's having some issues with his feline friend. Eric, we hope that your cat's doing well. So today we got Ashley. What up, Ashley? Welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me here for this.
Of course. Absolutely. And RBK is here as usual. What up, playa?
Not much, man. Just, it felt a little like college week again. I was cramming this book into my brain this week.
I did the same thing.
Yeah, I sat down and read it in like 2 hours or something and just picked out the stuff I thought was really cool. But yeah, this week was definitely cram time.
Yeah, for real. And we got Paul, Richard's high school chum. Paul, what up, man? Welcome.
Hey, not much, brother. We're here ready to talk.
Yeah, dude. You ready to talk about some Tasha's Cauldron of Everything?
Oh, yeah. It's got everything in
it. It has everything. Literally, it's everything you could ever possibly want to have a D&D experience. I don't know about that. It's going to have a tall order. So I guess because this is a deep dive episode, we usually do kind of we no black hole, no anecdotes. We just get right into it because we want to cover as much of this book as we possibly can, and we want to make it as sort of like compelling and incisive as we possibly can. So a little bit of background on Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, and on some level we'll kind of get into why we chose this book. So this book was a big deal when it first came out, and I don't know if it's still a big deal in D&D community. I don't know if people are still like drawing lines in the sand over it, but this was the book that had the publicity on it of, oh man, Wizards is changing how you play your character's race. Oh, it's revolutionary. It's got revolutionary shit on it. And people were all like the chuds were like, it's wokeism. Wokeism is in my book now. Wokeism is in D&D. And it kind of inspired a lot of the are orcs racist arguments. And you can go back to our episode about fantasy gaming and orcs, and you can see some of our thoughts about that we argued about, discussed openly outside the context of Tasha's Cauldron and everything. But at the time when it first came out, this book was very sort of polarizing. I literally had a friend of mine who I knew he was sort of a rightist dude. He's in my play group. He and I just don't really talk about politics very much. And I asked him if he was going to pick it up, and he rocked up to me and said, I'm never going to give Wizards of the Coast another red cent because they're putting wokeism in books now. And I was like, wow, he obviously felt real bad about it. So let's unpack the elements, the elephant in the room, shall we? And let's get right into it, right? Because it's right in the front. Now Tasha's Cauldron of Everything is, interestingly, and they kind of make this little note in the front, this is their version of Unearthed Arcana for 5th edition. All right.
Well, it's based on their blog, Unearthed Arcana, where they present things to people on the internet. So this is a lot of this is reprint from the internet, and then they've collected it as something that is more official, even though everything is optional.
They curated the things they like and bound it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One of the things that's kind of interesting about D&D books, though, is that because each edition, they kind of sell you the same book again with the new edition. And in this one, they particularly call out the Unearthed Arcana blog that is kind of buried on their webpage, and it's kind of a hassle to get to. And I used to look at it on a regular basis, and I don't anymore. And they're like, oh, well, this is all from our Unearthed Arcana blog. So if you're looking to draw a line, like a through line, and compare this to other books, Unearthed Arcana is not a bad place to start. And it has, if you're familiar with like the 3.5 Unearthed Arcana, it has a lot of the same stuff. Player options, some GM options, some stuff that's going to cause some problems probably, and then just a bunch of stuff you're probably never going to use. So if we get right into it, in Chapter 1, Character Options, okay? And then there's a bunch of stuff called Customizing Your Origin. And this is apparently pretty woke material, guys. Put your controversy faces on, because it tells you that if you don't like the ability modifiers for the race of the character you're playing, you can move them around. Whoa! I don't know, man. Seems pretty crazy to me. Also, if you don't like the bog standard languages, you can move those around too. So basically, it's just this list of stuff that people were already doing. It was just life. That's just life. And then we get down to, on page 8, a little paragraph called personality. Okay? I'm just going to, because this paragraph is so short that I can read it on this podcast. And I'm going to go ahead and do that if you guys will indulge me for just a second. Mm-hmm. Personality. The description of a race might suggest various things about the behavior and personality of that people's archetypal adventurers. You may ignore those suggestions, whether they're about alignment, moods, interests, or any personality trait. Your character's personality and behavior are entirely yours to determine.
What?
And that's it.
And I think that last sentence really, I think the last sentence really,
it wasn't already that way.
Yeah, it really sums up what this entire book is to me. This book puts the power back in the player's hand of making their character what they want it to be, and it just gives you more kind of narrative freedom to do so, rather than just having to go specifically by.
You see, Ashley, I'm really glad that you brought this up, because it's interesting, this perspective, right? I really, as I was reading the book, I felt like a lot of this book was almost written to GMs who were running these incredibly proscriptive games, where they were like, oh no, if you're going to play D&D, it has to be by XYZ way. And if you don't do it XYZ way, then you're not actually playing D&D. And in my experience, like, that's just not how anyone ever played D&D.
Yeah.
Is that how people are playing D&D now? Where it's like, you're just like, oh, no, you don't. Is that a thing? Is that what's going on out there?
Well, especially about personality. Like, I've never run into a group anywhere where it's like, I don't know, I want to play a dwarf that's happy-go-lucky and isn't dour and taciturn. Like, no, sorry, leave. Like, you're off my table. Like, I've never encountered that. Maybe I'm just playing with, better people than are out there. But like,
I think really talking about the Adventurers League, like if we want to, say who would be playing there. I guarantee you there are people that try to adhere to this like letter of the law, like they're lawful, in their way of they play this. Like even look at even before the characters options, there's like the 10 rules to remember. And it literally says,
oh my God, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That was such a weird document.
It's like the DM adjudicates the rules. Like, yo, it's your table, do what you want, right?
Yeah.
Exceptions succeed general rules. So like, hey, this thing says something different than the rules, you do it that way. Sure. Like, it's literally like trying to add a framework. And I think I've seen these rules elsewhere, like in other books, that trying to put a framework so that those people that have to follow the rules like exactly can be a little looser in their interpretation. Like, because I know there are people that literally argue over this stuff, like as their like secondary hobby. Like,
yeah, as a lifelong member of the Warhammer community, I have seen stuff like this. Warhammer Citadel have gotten very aggressive about releasing documents like this. And it's always interesting to me because the reason a company releases these words written on the page in this order is because they are sensing some kind of problem out there. They're hearing about stuff that's going on in their backyard, and they're trying to correct it. And to me, I'm just like, because when I say, are people playing this way? I'm certainly not trying to diminish the experience of people who have gone into clubs and who have had people talk down on them and gatekeep them like this. If that's somebody's experience, I completely believe them. What is boggling to me is that there are so many people out there who must be playing D&D in this way that they felt like they had to write a book to address it.
Like if there's a sign that says don't pee in the pool, it's because someone peed in the pool. You know what I mean? Like that sign is there for a reason. This book is here for a reason. And as far as like playing against the character types, that's been going on forever. So I mean, there are a lot of people who've been doing exactly what this book says for a long time, but for some reason they've decided that it needs to be put into book form and released for everybody.
Right, and then to have a bunch of reactionary chuds somehow turn this into a line in the sand that this is about wokeism. Like, first of all, if it's about wokeism, then great. You know, I don't understand how there's a single sentence in this part where it says personality that would somehow suggest the agenda of a nefarious group that's out to ruin fun and replace it with like high-handed morality lessons at the table.
I think part of this is a reaction to like last summer's orc controversy, and that this is being seen as like, oh, the people publishing this are reacting to what we didn't like in the first place, and therefore codifying the thing we didn't, the people that were objecting to orcs, the idea that orcs are this stereotype and come from a certain colonial perspective. And this allows you, it's written here. I've never seen, at a table I want to be at, have a problem with me playing an orc that was a wizard, right? I was always punished for it because my stats didn't match up the like optimal stats. But like, if I want to play an orc that's a wizard, I could do it. This allows me to be more, useful. Like if I'm playing an orc that's a wizard, because like my heritage, my background, I lived in a monastic order. Like I was an orphan that grew up and my feeding me in books and wisdom allowed me to be, I was not, out in the wilderness surviving every day. So my strength is not as high. That's what this is saying, allowing to do with on the page. If I could always have asked, and I'm sure Game Master was like, yeah, sure, whatever, do what you want. Like most of them don't care because it's not, as long as you're not trying to like, cut everybody off at the knees with your like character is the most useful character, therefore it's the only character.
Well, if you're playing an orc wizard, pop up. If you're playing an orc wizard, you're clearly not trying to min-max. You know what I mean? So it's like you're not trying to make this juggernaut of the character, but at least want to be able to do something, have some sort of like set up for some sort of success by playing this character. It's more fun that way. Like you don't want to play a character that's always going to fail at everything.
I think you've hit the nail on the head, Ashley, which is that this basically doesn't say anything more radical than your experience playing D&D should be fun. And you should be allowed to do the things you need to do to make your D&D game fun. And the idea that this is a somehow polarizing document, or that this is like a radical document that shows us the direction of like new D&D is insane. There's just, I wish, and we'll get this probably more to this in the future, but I wish that this is a document that was showing me a new D&D that was going to be like really full of concepts that I could sink my teeth into. I thought when I heard all the kerfuffle about this, I thought there was going to be like huge write-ups on Orc Society and Drow Society that changed them and that like made it so that old novels and stuff were not canon anymore. There's nothing like that in here. No. It just says if you want to play like a really serious gnome or a kind of whimsical orc, then that's fine. No one should kick you out of their table for that. I mean, am I taking crazy pills? This is madness.
Well, and the thing that gets me about it is it says like right at the top of everything about this is that they're optional rules. Like if you like one I have personally. My favorite high fantasy is I like making everybody play humans because I like demi-humans or whatever you're going to call them. I like them as aliens, and inevitably, if PCs make them, especially at the beginning, dwarves end up being just fat humans with beards, and elves end up being tall humans with pointy ears, and it kind of falls into that. So like the rules are you can be a dragonborn or whatever, but like for my table, I just tell people like everyone's playing human. That's the rule. Like, so it's optional. Like if you got somebody that hates this and is like, no, orcs are a monoculture, elves are a monoculture, and everyone's going to be the same. Like,
Yeah.
If that's your brand of fun, I mean, one, count me out, but two, like, I guess, a blessing on your house, go for it. But
yeah. I mean, that gets right into it, which is that like, and this is kind of like the strange culture wars that have been breaking out across, essentially the two most high profile kind of like fantasy gaming companies that there are, which is Games Workshop and WotC. We have these guys who are so upset that the books want to start implying modernity in terms of perspectives and just kind of, and games that have always had a certain kind of inferred cosmopolitan or metropolitan outlook are now going to have explicit outlooks. And they're like losing their fucking minds. It's a culture war, man. You don't want me playing the game. Wizards is going to come to my house and they're going to take away my toys. I can't play D&D anymore. It's, you know what? Like, Jesus, first of all, like, take a deep breath. Second of all, I hope you don't play D&D anymore. I mean, this guy who I had the conversation with about, like, WotC's not going to get another single cent out of me, like, reading that one paragraph has made me really reconsider whether or not I want to play D&D with this dude. Is that paragraph so upsetting to him, like, as a person? It somehow violates his will to be who he needs to be at the table because of that paragraph. If that's the case, if this mildly inclusive paragraph violates who he needs to be, then what kind of person is it that he needs to be? I mean, this is a very interesting question to me. Like, I kind of, it makes me wonder, Anyway, Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, you're fine. When you were saying that it's people have been playing like this all along, which yes, they have. There've always been people playing like this, and no, there's nothing in here that is completely groundbreaking, earth-shattering, like any of that. But it's like gay marriage, for example. There have always been gay people. There have always been people who play D&D like this. But by putting it in this book, or by making gay marriage legal, for example, or making it more known and more accepted, it makes people more willing to come out and play that way. You know what I mean? So
Sure.
That's the way I look at it anyway, is there might be people who it just literally never crossed their mind because it wasn't in the rule set or whatever. So for the guy that you were talking about, he doesn't have to play this way, He doesn't have to use it. It is all optional. He doesn't have to start using any of the things. He can say this book is not allowed at my table, which people do. If there's a book of rules or whatever, if there's a book that they don't like, they can say none of these things are going to be included in my games. Or if you wanted to only play humans, for example, you can still do whatever you want. It's just this book specifically states you can do whatever you want, and for some reason people are unhappy about that. I don't understand.
And to that point, the not Xanthar, but Unearthed Arcana 3.5 was an incredibly disruptive book. Almost no one used it for anything because it was just like madness. It might as well have just been called, here's some crazy shit that's going to completely disbalance your game. And I don't think that this book has that. Now, I feel like we've discussed the sort of like political ramifications of this book, which I thought we were going to spend all episode talking about. Turns out there's a bunch of other shit in here that's actually pretty interesting. Does anybody have any further thoughts on the inclusivity, quote unquote, angle of the book before we go on? Or
I think the one thing that is, to me, would be more tradition breaking is this is like literally the custom lineage that's like you can make any humanoid race you want, and it's literally the shortest version of that I've ever seen in any game. Like, look, just skin your weird twin-tailed fox people, use this as a guide, here you go. Like, whatever you want. To me, that is like that right there, that paragraph is more inclusive than the other thing before it. Like, it makes you can do whatever you want. Fine. Do it. We're cool with that. And I think that's an attitude that is apparently not well received. So,
yeah, that's true. That is a big one. I like that.
The thought I had when, Brendan, you were saying something about like people were losing their minds because it was going to like, you thought that based off the reaction, it was going to like break the canon of the novels or things like that. Like, I look at that paragraph and like, is if not the second most iconic character in D&D is Dritz Duerden. I mean, now we can all, everyone has opinions about that. But like, if you think about that, like, if you're trying to like, I've got to make Dritz Duerden by the rules, well, I guess he's a chaotic, evil drow that somehow runs around and does good things. Like, holy shit, you now have a rule for that. Like, if you really need a rule for that, though I cannot for a minute imagine why anyone ever needed a rule for that. There's a rule for that now. Now you can play a chaotic good drow ranger if that's what you want.
Huzzah.
Oh, great.
Huzzah. We're there.
And thus the hobby was improved forever.
So then after this very tame section that apparently blew up some people's heads, we now have a bunch of like, we seriously have almost like 70 pages of completely boring shit. The first thing straight off the bat is we have the Artificer, and I think the Artificer deserves a little bit of discussion. I think it's cool that the Artificer has stuck around. We saw the Artificer was the genesis of the Artificer was
Eberron.
3.5 Eberron. The idea of what the Artificer has changed clearly quite a bit in such a way that it now fits into more campaign settings, and it's not super broken because the old Artificer actually kind of really disrupted the economy of magic items in 3.5 when magic item creation was like an incredibly intensive rules experience that actually caused wizards to lose experience points. And then they just dropped this character into the environment and they were like, oh yeah, this guy can just like create them at will and then just throw them away when he's done with them. And they really made a lot of people angry with the way that they played, because on some level it kind of negated the wizard. And I think what Keith Baker really wanted to do when I look at the old Artificer is it's very clear to me that he wanted to write sort of a cyberpunky kind of D&D game. And I think he wanted to have a gunslinger character. And so he built this thing that could gunsling with wands. And it just turned out that if you played a lot of 3.5, you could make this like super broken thing. Anyway, here's the Artificer.
Yeah.
They're back.
When you say that the next like 70 pages are boring, I disagree. I read through the whole thing. And I think that it's not a storybook. Like, I mean, the Artificer is more fleshed out because it's an actual whole class that's in there. But everything else, it's like, it's more of a reference thing. I didn't look at it as something that I should read through and be like entertained by necessarily. But it's like you read through and it's like, okay, I want to play a cleric. So I'm going to go to the cleric section and see what new shit I can do with my character. You know, so I saw it more as like a reference thing. So maybe that's why I didn't find it as boring.
Well, I find it weird that what D&D should do is just nix level 1, 2, and 3, 1 and 2, and you start at level 3. You choose, and then I think almost no one plays non-specialized characters anymore. Like the third level is when you get your specialization. Those are the classes now. Like
the subclasses.
The subclasses are really the classes. Like you don't. I mean, I like a low level game, but D&D has got to a point where like the low level stuff kind of breaks. Like it's hard to play. You know, like being a low level wizard, it still sucks. It's always sucked, but the game has moved so far that like, you know.
All right, so we've done the Full Metal RPG thing, which is we've broken into the intensely theoretical already. So
these weirdos need to lighten up.
That's right.
Immediately
That's right.
after the Artificer, we come to about 60 pages of subclasses for the classes that already exist.
Yeah.
And if you haven't played D&D 5 in a minute, you kind of want a reminder. The subclass is essentially the very specialized class that you take on at about level 3, and you get powers and feats based on that, rather than on just like being a fucking rogue anymore. So it's kind of like the old prestige class idea, only they've made it much more part of the DNA of the main class. And again, so back to the theoretical, because we all love, and it has them for all of them. Barbarian, cleric, it goes through them alphabetically, and it's a big chunk of pages because there's a lot of fucking classes now.
Yeah.
So back to what Richard was saying in terms of theoreticals, because what Richard's really getting at is the crux of, on some level, the big controversies in D&D in this era, which is how it's designed. And I think, like Richard's saying, like, no one cares about level 1 and 2, but I've heard people say exactly the opposite. People are all like, no one cares about levels past 10. Why do we have
that too? Yeah.
Levels past 10? Nobody cares about levels past 10. The entire game should be level 1 through 10. It's very clear that these subclasses are designed to make you feel like there's a lot of options. And Ashley, you've already expressed how you feel like inspired, I guess. Is that a good word? Is that a fair word to choose? Inspired?
Inspired
Yeah,
to
like,
what? I'll
make
hear
a
the rest of your
character
sentence before. Oh, yeah.
Like
I mean, when I was going through and I saw, because I love Cleric's my favorite to play. And so when I saw like I know we'll probably get to it if we're going to go through the whole thing, but when I saw the Twilight domain that was added, I was like, that's cool as fuck. Like, I really like the Twilight domain. So there's some things that I saw in here that were cool that I'm like thinking about how I can put that into my character. But I think play more 5e, I'll say Pathfinder too, but like 5e than you guys do. I think that this is kind of more what I enjoy playing this type of stuff more than you guys do, maybe, because you like the horror and the cyberpunk and.
Well,
yeah.
your experience with both Pathfinder and Pathfinder 2nd and 5e are very salient right now, because I really feel like, and I don't want to go through these class by class and talk about the offerings, because that's what I find boring. I would never sit down and read a list of powers and abilities for pleasure. Like, to me, like you said, it is a reference document, and when you go to make your character, you're gonna go through the core book and be like, okay, whatever, this one's okay, this one's fine, and then you're gonna come through this one and you're gonna be like, oh, well, this one's maybe better, or piques me a little bit more. But in terms of boringness, it's just like, I will never, if I read the description of protective bond 6th level peace domain feature, I will never remember what that is. It will just be gone the second I'm done reading it. Yeah. So I'm not gonna lie, I just skipped this whole area. I feel like they are very acutely aware that where Pathfinder people roast D&D people is they say, you have no options, there's no options. So they're like, here's more options or whatever, right?
And there's optional class features as well. So like they basically rewrote the Ranger. Like the Ranger, like all of the Ranger features that are in the default Ranger, they've said, oh, here's optional versions of all those. And they do that on a couple different ones. Basically, the ones I hear people complain like, oh, Ranger is terrible, Fighter is terrible. Right. Like all those classes that people say are terrible. Like, here's a bunch of optional powers. You can swap out these powers that are not feats, just class features, basically feats, whatever. I think that was really, I think they're basically, this is like a Band-Aid on the system. This is like trying to look at the audience and say, hey, we want you to have the experience you have been talking about. So here's our idea of what those experiences are.
Well, it's kind of like when they released 3.5, right? Like they made some change. Instead of just releasing it as a new edition where everyone wanted to burn them at the stake with, come at them with pitchforks. They just release an optional book. Like it's the same idea. The one 100%. The one problem I have with this system is this section, sorry, I should say about the classes, is the same problem I have with every version of D&D and frankly almost every F20 game I've run into, which is I like to have like magic make sense. And one of the problems I always run into a 5e is you have a billion sources of magic, and this adds at least 2 of them to that already like insanely large list. So if you're trying to run 5e and like you want a metaphysics for how like magic works that's internally consistent, you now have to incorporate wizards, sorcerers, clerics. We'll throw paladins and clerics together, just being generous.
How dare you?
Rangers and druids, we'll throw them together too. Bards. Now we have to throw in artificers, and then they've added psionics back to it. And if I said it once, I'll say it 1,000 times. You don't need magic and psionics in the same damn game. Like, both are fine. Like, each of them are fine, but they don't need to be together. It's like carrots and beans. Like, you don't mix them with your mashed potatoes.
They've also, in terms of creating what you might call consistent metaphysics, they've made it very difficult for the GM in terms of like, well, there's a ghost world, and there's a Cthulhu world, and there's a fairy world, and then there's the planes, and then there's other shit. Like, and you're just like, wow. I mean, it's really one of those. Like, I understand it's a toolbox, and the D&D 5 has had a very toolboxy feel from the beginning, where they really don't want to say no to you about anything. They don't want any like specialized game coming out there and eating their lunch. Oh, you want Cthulhu? We got Cthulhu. You want horror stuff? Here's some horror stuff. You know, you're like, okay, all right.
Paizo.
But by creating that toolbox, it makes it so that the players can start kind of wagging the dog, where they're like, oh, I'm playing a warlock, and my patron is Cthulhu. And you're like, oh, I didn't know Cthulhu was in my game, but I guess he is now.
And that just comes down to like session 0 and character creation and stuff, as the DM setting the expectation of, this is the setting we're going to be in. This is kind of the feel we're going for. And you can pick from these things. And I mean, most tables I've played at, we do that, where it's like, this is the idea I have for the campaign. So you can play anything within this kind of thing.
Is this the first book that canonizes it? Because this is the only book I've ever read. D&D. I haven't read every D&D book, but this book actually mentioned session 0. And like what you should do, and lines and veils. That's later in the book. It's not called lines and veils, but So we'll get there anyway.
We'll get to their like, hey guys, have you heard about new gaming? We haven't section.
Here's the thing, though, is that's why I like this, is because they put it into book form, like we were saying before, because there are people who don't know what lines and veils are. They don't use them. So they might, if they knew about them, and for whatever reason they didn't before this. But yeah, so I like that it is in book form, because people might be more prone to use them.
I mean, I think that's a really good point, Ashley, that like, you know, we're all like long experienced gamers that are in a more, I think we all are in the left end of the gaming pool, to put it mildly. You know, so there might, you know, we're not thinking like we're 16-year-old kids that were picking up a D&D book for the first time. That's never, you know, they don't know anybody that plays it. So like, when, you know, and I've definitely been as guilty of this as anybody today, of like, when like, I didn't know I needed a rule for that. Like, well, I'm also, you know, not, you know, a 14, 16-year-old kid picking this up for the first time.
You didn't need a rule for it. It's for the new people coming in.
Right.
To be clear, I'm not dumping on the fact, because we're kind of like de facto talking about chapter 4 at this point on page 139. I'm not dumping on the fact that they put it in for the people who haven't heard this stuff. What I'm kind of roasting them for is that is in my way, that they didn't go far enough. That this is a very kind of milk toasty, very like vague, wishy-washy kind of like it's a document that really has no teeth, and they're kind of just like they actually write at one point like, maybe you've heard about stuff like this, and if you have, you should just research it and find some other stuff.
Well, just like put some links in, like give some credit to the community that came up with this shit. That's exactly. A part of it that doesn't really make, I don't like that a lot, because it's like, you should put the link to the X card, put the X card in there. Just put the fucking X card in there. Like,
I could see them. I could see WotC having a thing about being like, I could see the lawyers at WotC being like, we don't put stuff in our books unless we can trademark /copyright it. Anything that we're putting in is going to be trademarkable, copyrightable, ownable, and we're going to be able to regurgitate it now and forever. So we don't give away free content.
Call it the ampersand card. I don't like call it the ampersand card. Like,
I really
whatever.
do wish that they had just taken.
What are you talking about? We have soft and hard limits.
Yeah, exactly.
Soft and hard limits.
Buy, watch,
Right.
Like, dude, if you guys are gonna write this stuff, like, maybe you like reach out to some people from the community and pay someone to write some new shit instead of putting in this kind of like, well, I mean, you know what I'm saying? And that was my entire pushback on chapter 4, because to me it assumes that the game community is so. This is small c conservative, meaning like they're so kind of regressive, they're so not caught up with the times that this seems like hot shit. When it's really very kind of like, here's what everybody else in the whole fucking world has moved on to already. Maybe you should do something like that too. And it's just kind of like, dudes, come on, get with the program. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I'll agree with that. I agree. Yeah.
Let's roll back to chapter 2 and talk about my favorite thing in the book, which is group patrons.
Yeah.
Holy shit. I was real surprised to find this. This is cool as fuck.
Yeah.
I think this actually. So a lot of this stuff starts in Eberron, because this group patrons are also in the Eberron book. It's just not as heavy as this. Like the new
which iteration of Eberron?
The 5th edition version of Eberron.
5th edition one?
Yeah.
I wonder which one came out first. That's interesting.
So,
do they have specific ones? They have like the Zentarum, not the Zentarum.
Yeah,
like
they have the specific Eberron specific stuff, but like this is very much more generic, and they mention specific, worlds and specific patrons. But the idea is it's almost like the group template thing a lot of people talk about, where it's like, oh, we're going to be a team from academia, right? We're going to be a team of academicians who are going out in the field to like go get artifacts or whatever. Like I love that idea. Like I think it really makes D&D groups more cohesive, as a group of characters more cohesive. And also, circling slightly back to the session 0 idea, they actually mention like you should figure out how you know each other. Like we've only been doing that for like 15 years, but like to say that, like not having to meet in a bar, and like they're kind of like building up like the idea of your characters existed before they were level 1, but also they existed to level 3 where we probably want you to play anyways. So like
yeah, they're bringing in a lot more of just like the narrative gaming experience, I feel like, that comes from like PBTA, which is something you do anyways. You establish those threads, So I liked that they were bringing that into 5e more.
What, Paul, did you have something you wanted to say before I go on my next rant?
No, I like the patron thing. You guys pretty much said that. Again, it kind of reminds me, actually, the thing that I first thought of was the Acquisitions Incorporated from Penny Arcade that they put out. It's the same type idea. It puts everybody together like immediately. You're all doing the same thing. You all know what you're in for. I like it.
That's like the last one is like being your own patron, right?
Yeah,
it's basically that's the Acquisitions Incorporated is basically the being your own patron, which is you're running the venturing guild or whatever, the criminal syndicate or whatever it is. Like, hey, here's a couple of rules. Like I actually really enjoy how short a lot of these rule pages are, like not getting into like nitty gritty, just like, oh, well, here's the cost for that. Like it's being your own patron. In a lot of versions of D&D, that would be a whole chapter. Like,
do you remember Birthright? They literally turned that into a campaign setting.
Right.
It was just like, you're the king and you don't go adventuring anymore. Here's a fucking box set and then a series of additional box sets about how to play that.
Right.
I feel like Paul hit the nail on the head a few points ago when he says that this book is basically D&D 5.5. And it seems like one of the things that this book emphasizes is, rather than in previous Unearthed Arcanas, like, oh, here's how to do wacky shit, here's how to do extremely customizable shit, this one is really focused on replayability. Like it's almost like the writers just tacked the word replayability up in front of them when they were doing their dev sessions. Because and you see kind of where this book comes in the development cycle, where the game has been out for a few years. There's a whole group of people who have been like just playing it and playing it and playing it. Probably there's a bunch of people who've been playing it exclusively, and we need new stuff. We need to keep them interested because they're probably getting bored of playing a rogue and a fighter who meet in a bar. How do we break out of that? How do we do something a little different? And just this patrons thing of being like, here are some very basic rules, very light, non-intrusive, that just answer the question of, well, why do we all hang out together? You know? Which, I mean, when you're a kid and you play your first few campaigns of D&D, you don't care. You don't give a fuck about that shit. But you start aging with the game a little bit, and the questions start becoming more nuanced and complex, and you start kind of wondering, well, why the fuck does my Dragonborn hang out with a cleric of your god? And also, you keep doing things that make me hate you. Why do I stick around? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, for real.
Mm-hmm.
And this chapter answers those questions so artfully. I love the little things that they might send you to do. D6 table that accompanies each type of patron, because you can just be like, oh, I'm gonna run a fucking adventure. It's gonna have 6 things in it. Boom, 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 boom. You know, it just wrote a campaign for you. It's fucking awesome, man. This is really good.
Yeah, because you could just literally go, that's chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4, chapter 5, chapter 6, and we're done. Yeah. And we can have the interstitials where we're back in the university or whatever, talking to different the departments that we're part of. Like, yeah,
totally,
done.
Totally.
Yeah,
I fucking love it. And then, and this is also great, where they have retainer roles, and this is showing my dumbass self. If I had done this, I would have paired role. They have role and background, right? And it's a table. And if you want to have this role within the organization, then you should have, then perhaps somebody from this background would fill this role. And the backgrounds, if you forget from D&D 5, are kind of like they're kind of like little background starting packages that kind of give a vague little story of what you did before you were an adventurer, and it also comes with some gear. But they married the role idea to the background idea rather than the class idea. They were like, It doesn't matter what your class is.
Yep.
What matters is what kind of person you are, like how you think, how you operate. Fucking so smart. This is, I mean, this is really good development here, and I'm not gonna lie, I was not expecting it.
Yeah, and I think it's like a lot of fun could be had with these patrons. Like you could legitimately. You could literally set up like you could have your rival patrons, right? You could have basically use one patron and then have the rival patron be, and you already have all the structure for it. So you literally are just like, you can just roll a few characters and then it's already structured. You don't have to think about that. It's fantastic. Like a great idea.
Yeah. Chapter 2. Strong, very strong. Yeah. That kind of leads us right into chapter 3, the magic items section and more spells and stuff. Does anybody have strong feelings that were summoned up by chapter 3?
It reemphasizes that green flame blade is a thing, and it is the worst thing as far as like preventing munchkining in your game that will ever happen in D&D, I hope. But other than that, it's fine.
I liked all the magic tattoo things. They had a whole ton of runes and different things like that. The magical tattoo things was pretty cool. And on page 132, I just want to show you guys this because I read it and I was like, this is fucking ridiculous. The mighty servant of Luco is it's like a Jaeger, that you can carry your shit in. Like it's this big thing. Christ. It can fit 2 medium-sized characters and all their stuff. So armor class is 22. The hit points on this thing are 310. 310 hit points in armor class of 22 on this. And the speed is 60 feet. I'm like, you can just jump in this thing and roll around, and you're good. Like this is wild.
For I think Ashley's point kind of jumps over to you, Richard, because in the pre-show we were talking about Shadowrun, and you were like, "Don't fantasy my cyberpunk."
Right.
And there's a number of points. Yeah, there's a number of points in this book that are where I feel like, don't Marvel movie my D&D. And like the art, there's a suit of artificer armor that is very
Iron Man. It's Iron Man. It's literally Iron Man, and that's the new artificer subclass for this book. It wasn't in Eberron. That's the new thing in this book for artificer.
Yeah, did not love it. Did not love it.
Yeah, I literally wrote down.
Eye roll.
I literally wrote down, like, for the other one, the Battlesmith, I said real steel. I was like, it's clearly my friend robot, real steel, you know. Yeah. And then those are the two that I was like, wait, these are just movies that somebody is like, I really want to play these. This
kind of gets into one of my pet peeves, which is the sort of like, and we've seen this kind of since the 90s. It's like that Marge Simpson meme where she's like, this happened so slowly I didn't even notice it. But it's the great kind of like convergence of everything is one thing, you know, like Star Wars movies, our Marvel movies, our D&D adventures, our Pokemon cards, our Happy Meals. And it's just kind of like, I guess
it's all interconnected. It's all interconnected.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
speaking of which,
Paizo, I think, has the first sin with that. With their, I always say the name of the world wrong, Galaron or whatever.
Galarian, yeah.
Where it's like they clearly said down, it's like, we're going to have a world for every trope, like a little country for every trope in our world.
But they were doing, but they were aping Forgotten Realms with that.
It's worse than Forgotten Realms. Like, it really is, because it's like there's like French Revolution land, and like, you know, there's like Revolutionary America land, and then there's like, you know, Viking land, and, you know,
I take your
point, where the adventure happens. And
I'm willing to go with you, especially when you look at the Pokemon caster character from Pathfinder, the guy who's like, I catch monsters and evolve them.
Right.
And then I fight them on my behalf. And I'm all like, I was like, even back then, I was like, I don't like what you're doing, Pathfinder.
He just wants to be the very best, like no one ever was.
Speaking of like connecting everything back, there's literally on like 106, there's traveling to other worlds. They literally talk about how it's a little like blue sidebar. And it's like talking about why are all these D&D worlds so the same in so many ways? Oh, well, there was a first world and that broke apart. That was the first material plane. And then the first material plane broke apart into all these other material planes. And that's why all these worlds have exactly the same things in them.
I mean,
but it's like an actual little bit of lore.
I actually thought that was it was a more interesting way to do it than what they, than like, we're just going to ignore these other lines. Like, we're going to try and make a thing, but whatever. Hand waving, jazz hands.
The notion of the prime material plane is an old idea. I like I mean, I couldn't tell you where it came from, but I do remember being in high school and having some grognard guy with a high school beard, like, telling me about the prime material plane, and I'm like, well, that must mean that there's a secondary material plane or something, right?
The derivative material plane.
But I would
timeline.
I sort of think of it as sort of a meta thing too, because it was like the prime material plane was whatever the Dave Arneson's campaign was, and then it like broke into all of the other campaigns that are after that.
Did you guys see the Taroka of Souls on page 129?
No.
Yeah, I like this quite a bit.
Some of the magic items are really cool. Like,
yeah. This is a great little bite of Ravenloft that you can kind of like throw into any campaign, and it's a Taroka. It's a Taroka deck that you can use it to either give advantage to your guys, or you can use it to give disadvantage to your opponents. And but whenever you do it, you have to take a check, and if you fail a check, it releases a monster that has been bound into the Taroka, and then you have to go kill the monster. And what's great is that the monster isn't just it tells you what monster it is. They're like all from the DMG.
I was like, holy shit, those are some crazy monsters. Like for
yeah, they are they're crazy monsters, man.
Yeah.
And then they all have advantage. That monster just gets perpetual advantage, and then you get perpetual disadvantage until you take the monster out. And I'm
shit.
like, this is fucking cool as shit. At the very end, it gets into a destroying the deck thing. It says, in order to destroy the deck, you have to kill all the monsters that are living in the deck. And I'm like, that's another great campaign.
Yes.
Here's another fucking off.
You missed it. Not only your reward for killing all the monsters that live in the deck is you get another monster that lives in the deck that you have to kill.
Yeah, well, there's the 15th monster that like is a big. Well, I won't spoiler it, but there's a big evil monster that lives in the fucking deck, and he's gonna kick the shit out of you. It's like you really gotta like. I mean, this is you could base a years long campaign around just this magic item, and I really think that there's a lot of utility in that I dug the fuck out of that.
I would love to have that big evil monster kind of like whenever you pick up the deck, just like subtly whispering in somebody's ear, like, "Oh yes, you know, like just like get intimately in to know the personality of this bad guy before you get to him. Like every time you use this magic item, like it's fantastic.
That would be a great thread. Good call. Good call, BK.
I have a question on the chart real quick. So it's got, you roll a D100 for the different souls that are in there, but then 15 through 100 or 15 through 0 is just the line. What does that mean?
Right. Well, so
no monster pops out.
Yeah.
Oh.
You got a card that didn't contain a monster.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha.
It really wants to, because essentially you're rolling a percentile, and you have a 14% chance of summoning a monster that's going to go down every time you summon a monster. So it really wants you to use the fuck out of this thing. And if you use it a lot, then you'll summon a lot of monsters, which is great. It's just I love the wheel.
Yeah. And if you go 7 days without using it, you lose your attunement. So they definitely want you to use it. So cool. Awesome. I like it. I like that.
They want you to use that shit.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
All right, so we're back to Chapter 4, Dungeon Master's Tools. We already kind of commented on some of the safety tools stuff and Session 0 stuff, but then they have this idea of the sidekicks. I thought this was kind of interesting.
I think it would be
super interesting, but kind of interesting.
I would think it would be good to run a kids campaign where they play sidekicks, the sidekick characters, because they're so kind of focused that you could just give them sidekick characters and like they can play whatever creatures, and you could have a hero character that they're all helping, right? So like that, as you know, we kind of, you know, GM PCs are, you know, not good for most games, but like for a kids game, I think that could be a fantastic way to run a kids game. That was just my thought on the whole sidekick thing.
I like that idea, which is something I had not actually thought of when I was looking at it. But my first thought on this is it's a thing from back, at least as far back as 3, that I do not like, where it's every creature in the world has to have a fucking class and level. Like you run into the baker and he's got to be like he's a 15th level expert, because like just give him hit points. Like you don't like.
Well, I think it specifically says only do this if you're going to bring them along at the very beginning. Right. Only give them expert or whatever. Just kind of figure it out after.
But it's like an extension of. In the first place, I remember it was in 3 where they had like a commoner class or like a royal class, or like you don't. Like, no, what you do is you just tell the DM to assign some hit points and they can do some things. Like,
see, Paul and I were triggered by exactly the same thing, which is the first one is an expert. And I'm like, I remember expert from 3.5. Are they bringing back the non-adventuring classes? And then you kind of turn the page and you kind of read it a little bit more and you're like, okay, thank God they aren't. Because, again, Paul has exactly the same take that I do, which is that was a fucking mess. You met like a 15th level like aristocrat, and you're like, wait a minute, where'd you get your experience points? Did you go out and like kill a bunch of beholders? How are you 15th level? Like, I don't understand. Your stats infer that you're incapable of killing beholders, yet you could only be 15th level if you killed a bunch of beholders. So what's happening?
Lots
that
of
was a
rats. No rats
Lots
in
of
the kingdom.
rats. ROUSs everywhere. Yep.
So I thought this was. I thought this sidekick thing was kind of corny, but I didn't hate it. Parlaying with monsters, I thought was a missed opportunity. It's too short. It's a great idea that's way too short. Why only 2 pages?
I mean, at least it gets people thinking about solving things without murder, like,
Yes.
which is a great leap. Anything that does that, I'm willing to accept.
Yeah.
Like if
Yeah.
you're playing Murder Hobos, you should have to read this. Just like look through it.
Yeah.
Give it a
It's a
shot.
cool idea.
Mhm.
It's my understanding that the Ravenloft material, which I have Ravenloft sitting over there, sort of expands on this a little bit. But I haven't looked at Ravenloft because I didn't want to. I didn't want to come on here and be like, because I love that shit. I didn't want to be like, this sucks. Let's just talk about Ravenloft. I didn't want that to happen.
Is it Van Richten's guide? Did
yeah,
you get the
Von
Van Richten's
Richt-
guide? Nice.
Yeah.
Von
yeah.
Richten. Sorry.
Yeah.
Van
Yeah,
Von.
you can call him Van.
Van.
Whatever.
He's Van Wilder, like
Yeah.
Van Morrison Richten. It's the name of my CD project.
You're
awesome.
my brown-eyed corpse.
Yes.
So then there's a section, environmental hazards. This is pretty cool. Here's another cool thing that I like quite a bit.
The wrath of
What'd you
the
guys think?
GM codified in a different way. It's a right.
But you roll for it.
right.
So. Mhm.
Well, one of the things that, as a lifelong GM, one of the things that is vexing about playing a game like D&D is that players. There's a very fine line between being like encouraging players to be doing stuff and engaging them in conflict with the environment, and being punitive. And you often don't really know where that line is. You're kind of trying to gauge the dispositions of people at the table. And you're also trying to keep people entertained. So it's like a very fine line to walk.
Mhm.
And what I really like about these environments is the way these are very big effect tables that kind of show a different environment bleeding into the material plane. And it also tells you, not only does it give you a big table of like cool effects that can happen, but it tells you when they are triggered. So it's not just like you have to sit there. It's like when the players do something or when something happens, roll on the table. And that, hey, it's very OSR like. Very interesting.
Interesting.
Tell these guys. There's a lot of looking over the fence in this book and presenting it as something novel. But what can I say? The section on page 154, the haunted environment, is so fucking good. I mean,
Yeah, that was really
like,
cool.
right?
And
Yeah, I
the
really
infestation,
liked that one.
the infestation was really cool too. And so I know it's kind of cheesy, but I kind of love the mimic colonies.
Yeah, with the juvenile mimics. I was like, that's so cute.
Dude,
Love it.
the mimic colony was real fresh.
I like that a lot.
I gotta say, real fresh. Like if you look at the just kind of across the board, you have the Far Realm, which is like this Cthulhu thing, but then you have the Haunted Realm, which is like that's something that comes up quite a bit. If you're the kind of GM that I am, this is the kind of thing that comes up, and you
Yeah.
just don't really know how to arbitrate it. This is great. This is a great way to arbitrate it. Infested, I thought was neat, and then the Mirror Zone, neat, but then the
I
Mimic
liked the
Colony.
mirror one.
Yeah, I was just like, shit, this Mimic Colony is something I never would have thought of, and that is rad. I read this Magic Mushrooms era thing, and I think that it's on page 166, and I think that the person who wrote this needs to do some magic mushrooms and then come back and rewrite it.
Yeah, it was a little like
Not professional advice.
it was a lot of gimmies. Like it was not like a lot of because it's supposed to be like poisonous. Like I was looking at that because it's like the shortest one, and I'm like, wait, shouldn't there be some like psychedelic shit going on here
Yeah,
or some like
yeah.
This
like
is definitely a guy that this is definitely written by somebody that is an enthusiast of the product that wants the experience, I think.
But I mean, like the creature gains benefits of the telepathy spell for 24 hours. A lot of people think they can,
You can speak with
telepathic.
plants for 8
Yeah.
hours. I mean,
Yeah,
come on.
I was like, so not totally wrong.
It like
I'm like,
expands
where's
your
my plus
consciousness,
4?
man.
Where's my +4 intelligence and I learn every spell?
Yes.
-4
for 20
wisdom,
minutes.
+4
Yes. I was going to say just for 20 minutes though, because you will immediately forget when it wears off.
And like the top one is a magical mist pours out of the creature's eyes and ears, acting as fog cloud for 1 hour that is centered on the creature that moves with it. It's like, so you're just going to sit there for an hour in a cloud? Like, wait, that's a different experience.
See, what would have been fun,
Yeah.
I would have done with it is just made those effects only be real to the person who ate the mushroom.
Yeah, that would have been
He
good.
thinks it fogs for it out.
Illusionary cloud, but then people will be like, "Oh, I just believe illusion." It's like,
Oh God, please kill me. Thank you for reminding me why I don't play D&D. So here we go. We're almost done with the book. This is the final section in the GMing section. It's this section called puzzles. It's kind of neat. It's a little thing that tells you how to build some puzzles, and it gives you some puzzles to build off of. And then there's actually some sheets in the back that you can photocopy and distribute if you ever want to run these puzzles. You know, I could be a curmudgeon and say, like, oh, well, this thing's so full of player options, your players are going to know all these fucking puzzles. But
Right. I'm going to be a curmudgeon and say exactly that. But
well,
Like they should have done a separate DM guide or something.
yeah, my curmudgeonly self says, "Oh, the players are not going to get these puzzles." Like, even if they, because it's a lot of letter replacement. Like, at least I was reading some of them, and it was a lot of like, "Oh, you have to like figure out the number of creatures and then do a letter replacement." Like, this is not cryptology cryptographic.
I'm going to dust off my soapbox and stand on it now. Puzzles are the worst things that you could possibly put into a role-playing game, because if the players don't get it, it grinds the game to a halt. Like, and then you're either spoon-feeding it to them, at which point, what the hell was the point of putting the puzzle there in the first place? Or you go nowhere. Like, the game's just done. I will, like, pack up your dice. Like, I guess we'll start playing Star Wars next week.
okay, so here's my reaction, Paul. I agree with you almost 100%. My point of contention is that there is, because you can see the thinking that you have in D&D design, that you're thinking in the same way they are, where they're like, oh man, these things are a drag, get them out of here. And that's why they kind of disappeared and were replaced by traps, right? Traps became this thing, and then you either defeated it yes or no with a d20 check, and then there's mathematical consequences for either one of those binary decisions. But it turns out there's this group of people who really like puzzles. And I don't want to gatekeep on them. I'm not going to step on them. If fucking puzzles are your thing in D&D, then go ahead. Enjoy your puzzles. Where you find, and again, this is sort of a reoccurring theme through this book, where you find a lot of the people who really enjoyed puzzle solving in D&D went when 3.5 went over to no puzzles, just traps. They all just jumped ship and went to the OSR. And because this book cribs from the OSR so hard, you can really tell that they're like, please come back. You don't have to play Dungeon Crawl Classics. Here, look. There's a piano in the room, and it's missing 3 keys, and you know what I'm saying?
I got rid of my yoga studio and put your old room back. Come back. We never see you anymore. Your father misses you.
You don't call, you don't write.
See,
Yeah.
and my thing about puzzles is you should be able to see the solution. A lot of these you can't just see this. You should be able to see the solution. Any good puzzle game I've ever played, you can see the solution. You just can't do it yet. You have to figure out. You have to go like the 3 keys, right? You need to find those 3 keys for the keyboard.
Right.
Okay, so you're going to be looking for those in the rest of the adventure. It shouldn't be like it's like the locked door problem. It could be something bonus, or that could be the end. But if you just go around the rest of the environment, you're gonna be like, oh, there's a key stuck in the top of that statue's head. How am I going to get that stupid key? You know,
the impenetrable door has a dog-shaped keyhole. You have to go find the dog-shaped key.
Right.
What Richard, the direction you've gone with this is exactly the problem that Paul and I have with puzzles, is that they are by nature a MacGuffin that is mysterious, and you begin to sort of like suppose things about them. Your brain engages pattern recognition software or whatever, and the pattern recognition software in a human brain is very often wrong. So I said, oh, there's a piano and it's missing 3 keys. And your thought was, oh, we need to find these fucking keys. But what if you don't? Like, what if the point of the puzzle is to notice that they make a chord, and now you have to play that chord on the piano.
Right.
And you don't. You spend the rest of the fucking dungeon walking around looking for piano keys, missing piano keys, and they don't exist.
I mean,
you know what I'm saying? This is.
I mean, I'll show you where my hate of puzzles came from. I was involved in a long-term 2E game. Richard was actually involved in it as well. And there was a place where we ran into the Sphinx. They gave us a riddle. It's the indestructible Sphinx that you cannot kill, that can kill you immediately if you get it wrong.
Of course.
And this 5-year campaign ground to a halt because we couldn't figure out what its riddle was. And it was not man. Just so you know, the answer was not man. So it's okay, well, that was an answer, and it wasn't even
the big boss, or wasn't
to get to the final boss of the campaign. It's a side quest that their characters are just dead, and everyone else just turned around well, guess we're not saving that place. Bye.
Well, that guy's a dick, anyways. But
Who, the Sphinx?
No, the guy that made up the Sphinx. Anyway, I didn't play in that game, but I know exactly who you're talking about. Anyway.
Well, I want to hear Ashley's thoughts on this section, because, Ashley, you are a self-described puzzle aficionado, sort of, by raising your hand. I'm just describing those terms to you, sorry.
No,
so you didn't self-describe at all.
Yeah, I did this.
What are your... You raised your hand.
I did that, yes.
So what are your thoughts here?
I love puzzles because one of the things I really love about playing is that I get to use my brain in ways that I don't in everyday life. So I really love just the problem-solving aspect regardless. I mean, when you're playing, that's kind of what you're doing, is you're there is a problem, how am I going to solve this, So puzzles are just one more way to do that. So that's why I like puzzles, because it makes me use my brain in a way that I normally wouldn't, and that's one of the things I really love about role-playing. So I really like just the whole DM section in this book, but I do like the puzzles because of the fact that it gives you more ideas, because you can always Google, you know what I mean? But if you're Googling, they're ones that are kind of out there for other people to Google also, so they're easier to get. But I really liked that they had them in there, personally. So as far as specifics, I didn't look at the specifics on them. I kind of browsed through them. Yeah. But
I mean, that honestly, I think it's if you're not planning on running a game anytime soon, I think it's the kind of thing you probably just didn't even look at. Just let your give that option to your GM so that they can take it easy one day. I didn't look at them too closely either, because my brain is not very good at puzzles, and so I don't know if you could rebuild these puzzles, or if these are very, very specific puzzles that they're oh, just deploy this in your game, or if they give you the options about, well, here's how you might rework it so that it's a little bit fresh.
They have some in there.
Oh, that's good. That's good. I mean, I do like that, because it's one of the things those Ken St. Andre, I guess, is kind of saying dumb stuff on Twitter right now, so I'm not trying to pump him up too much, but those old Flying Buffaloes, Grimtooth's Traps collections that had that were all based on physics. They were all Rube Goldberg machines. I'm not sitting at home building Rube Goldberg machines, but you could buy books of them if you wanted to introduce them into your stories to foil your players and to kind of tickle that part of their brain. And I'm glad that those are out there for people who want them. You know what I'm saying? I'm not proficient at it.
Again, it's just one more tool that they have in here so that you can cater the game to what you want it to be. So if you don't want to use them, don't use them. Fuck them. But if you do, then they're in here, and it gives you more tools, like you said, toolboxy to use to create the experience that you would like.
So let's do closing thoughts on Tasha's. Paul, why don't you give us your closing thoughts on the book?
I mean, I think the first part of it shouldn't be controversial. There's that. I think beyond that, it's a D&D supplement. I think the first part of it is the only. I really do like that they got rid of disconnecting, particularly the attribute bump from your, race or, origin or whatever, so that you disconnected that. The rest of it, I think there's good stuff in there if you're playing 5e, as far as the spells, the puzzles, if you want the puzzles, the magic items, the additional stuff for all the classes. So it's a D&D supplement. I think the best thing in it that it probably did is just giving people agency to disconnect the starting abilities from being an elf, a dwarf, a human, or whatever, or like Richard said earlier, giving you a nice little template just to make your own whatever you want to be. I think you used the 2 Foxtail version. That's my take.
Cool. Richard, thoughts?
I think that it's a if you're into 5e, it's a worthy book to pick up and read. I think there's a lot of cool options in here. I think they've, addressed a lot of issues. And also, I agree. Like, this should not be a controversial book in any way. It's optional. So, somebody is saying it's my table, my rules. Like, this is just another set of tools and rules for you to play with. I think there's some fun stuff if for replayability, as Brendan was saying. I'm fine with it. I think it's a fine book for 5e. So,
sure. Ashley, closing thoughts.
Really liked it. So I think, you could take this in your PHB and that's all you need. I know there are a lot of other supplements out there that have a lot of information in them, but I really like this one. It's got the stuff at the beginning that was controversial. It shouldn't be. It's got a lot of new cool stuff for all the different classes and the subclasses and all of that. And I really liked it. I thought it was great, and I'm glad I have it. I picked it up before I knew we were doing the deep dive on it, so I wanted it anyway. But I'm really happy with the purchase of it. I like it.
Cool. I ordered this and Van Richten's Guide simultaneously, and I'm not gonna lie, it was kind of cool when they arrived to like open up the box and to be like, whoa, dude, D&D books. D&D manuals, bro. Like, it gave me a feeling, I guess a nostalgic feeling, like I was a kid again, and it was like that feeling of ripping into a new D&D book. And then that feeling was like almost immediately dispelled by what I consider to be the kind of like deeply antiseptic experience of interacting with a D&D book. The contemporary D&D books, they're just very, like, the art in this book I thought was pretty lackluster. There's, despite the nice things I've had to say about the book overall, there is probably about a third of it that's just on some level kind of like almost like dead. It's just like lists of powers, and you're kind of like, yeah, nice. I guess that's cool. If I played D&D like all the time, I want more powers than less powers because I don't want to get bored. But that's like a third of the page count, and just as like we were saying earlier, for the pleasure of sitting and reading a book, it's not very fun. However, was it very fun to read the AD&D Player's Handbook, 2nd edition? No, it's all math. Why the fuck would you want to read that? So, that's an apples to oranges comparison. There's more better stuff in this book than I gave it credit for on the front end. I think it's a really good guide. And if somebody was like, Brendan, we really want you to run a game, we want to get around, do the thing, please run 5th edition for us, I'd be like, you know what? I can do that. That's not going to kill me. I'm not going to like vomit into my own shoes or anything if I have to run 5th edition. I'll play with this thing. It's got some good stuff in it. There's actually some good tools in here that will spice this thing up and make it not like eating oatmeal every day for 6 years. It's actually, it's cool. What can I say? It's cool. Ain't gonna set the world on fire, and if you're expecting it to, then you'll be disappointed. And if you're the kind of person who's really so sensitive that it does set your world on fire, then my poor sheltered friend, you need to get some life experiences, bro, is what I'm trying to say. You need to go out and talk to some people and shake some hands, interact. Anyway, yeah. So, I'd give it like 3 stars out of 5 or something. It's a competent book. Yeah. I mean, I'm not angry that I read it. How about that?
That works. Yeah.
There we go.
Nice. All right. Well, that's another deep dive episode of Full Metal RPG out of the way. We got more Full Metal RPG coming to you in July if you want to reach out and get a hold of us. We have many vectors to do so. You can find them on our link tree, which is fullmetalrpg.com. That's what you should go to.
Which they're seeing in the video right now. I've transitioned.
Wonderful.
And now I'm also showing them the classic T-shirt, available till July 5th. This will be out at least a few days before that, but we'll be shouting this on social media as well. The classic T-shirt still available in honor of Brendan and his fine work he has done over the years. So, and also in honor of all of our fine work, we found some call it fan art. And we had to put it on a T-shirt, fan art. So this fan art we found, and it's lovely. And then we put some of our favorite reviews on the back of it. So it's a new feature. So these weirdos need to lighten up. It's one of our favorite lines. We laugh about it all the time because we will not lighten up. It's just not what we do. So that's also available on our TeePublic store, as well as Meh is one of our favorite reviews.
That's my personal favorite review ever. It's just Meh.
So that'll be available for a while. I don't know. We suck, so it's
available. It's available as long as it's available.
So yeah, if you want a Full Metal RPG Sucks T-shirt, we got one for you. So
definitely scoop one of those up while they're available. And if you're interested in hearing more Brendan Carrion hot takes, I will continue doing my Warhammer-themed podcast, Realm of Fire. That's all caps, Realm of Fire, ! That's for Warhammer hot takes. But you still have, I think, about 2 more episodes of dealing with old Brendan before I shuffle out the door and then become a guest or something. So, all right. I just want to say, Paul, dude, thanks for taking the time to come out today, man. I know you put a lot of work into being here. Thank you so much, and thank you for your hot takes. I love your hot takes always. Richard, thank you for putting it together. Ashley, thank you for your insights into especially the 5e and the Pathfinder stuff, because 3 white dudes with beards talking about something that they don't know about.
Welcome to podcasting.
I was going to say.
That's the sequel podcast. Ashley and 3 white dudes with beards talking about things they don't know anything about.
All righty. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Have a great night.
Ah.